Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. One of, if not the most exciting game that we'll see in all of 2024 went down Saturday night in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Jalen Milroe, Kalen DeBoer, Alabama taking care of business. And now that kind of opens up the question, is this Alabama team the clear number one team in the country moving forward in 2024? I would argue, in a very strong manner, I would argue this. Yes. Now, you look at the most impressive win that we've seen in the college football season. It starts with Alabama taking down Georgia, a Georgia team that I still think might be the second best team in the country sitting here Tuesday morning. But I think more importantly, you look at some other impressive wins and say, all right, Texas goes on the road and beats Michigan week 2. That Michigan team was not a top 10 team in the country. I would argue Michigan still isn't a top 10 team in the country, even though the AP poll might say they are. Now, Texas looked awesome. They're one of the best teams, not only in the SEC, but in the country. But if you're asking me what was the most impressive win we've seen to start the 2024 season 5 weeks in, I think it is very clearly Alabama taking care of business on Saturday night. Now, I think the biggest takeaway that we can all have from this game is Jalen Milroe is a different quarterback than what we saw in 2023. The biggest question mark we had with Kalen DeBoer immediately in 2024 was, how does Jalen Milroe fit what Kalen DeBoer wants to do on offense? And quite frankly, that question doesn't really matter, because what makes Kalen DeBoer such an elite football coach? He's going to build an offense around the personnel that he has. He's not going to grab Jalen Milroe and try to fit him into the offense that Michael Penix ran in 2023, because that's just not what Jalen Milroe does. You look at Kalen DeBoer in this 2024 offense, he's allowing Jalen Milroe to just go out and play football. You can tell Jalen Milroe is not thinking too much when he's playing. He's just going out there and playing. And we know that when Jalen Milroe looks like that, he's one of the most difficult quarterbacks to defend in the country. You go back to 2023 when we saw Jalen Milroe play his best football, he was just going out and playing football. When we saw him play some bad football in 2023, it normally had to do with Jalen Milroe probably thinking too much. Kalen DeBoer has built an offense where, hey, we're going to look at our personnel, specifically at the quarterback position. How can we create an offense that leans in to what Jalen Milroe wants to do and what he does best? And that's what you saw with Alabama hanging 41 points on one of the best defenses in the country. Want to get into, a couple of things that I kind of noticed for this Alabama offense. We'll touch on the Alabama defense as well. Now, before we get into it, as always, most importantly, would love to hear from you guys. Is Alabama clearly the number one team in the country moving forward in 2024? Let it fly in the comment section. I know that's maybe a little bit of a hot take. There might be some Texas fans that disagree. I think that's the beauty of college football. So let it fly in the comment section. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into this one. Let's start with what we saw from this Alabama offense. And I want to start with the passing attack, and I want to start with a narrative that I think is just flat out wrong that you're seeing post this Georgia-Alabama game. And that is, this passing attack is too reliant on true freshman Ryan Williams. You take a look at the numbers, Jalen Milroe threw 33 passes. There was only 7 targets to Ryan Williams in that football game. This wasn't just a one-dimensional passing attack that went to Ryan Williams. Now, I think you're seeing people say that because you look at the highlights, you look at the football game, and Ryan Williams was the player that was making the game-changing plays. And I think it's very clear that Ryan Williams is the wide receiver one in this Alabama offense as a 17-year-old true freshman. Yeah, that's 100% fair to say, but it is not fair to say that this Alabama passing attack is too reliant on Ryan Williams. They do a phenomenal job getting the football to all areas of the football field. You look at the running backs getting involved in the passing game. You look at the tight ends getting involved in the passing game. You're going to see other Alabama games where it might be a Jeremy Bernard game, and Jeremy Bernard's the one hitting the explosive plays, the game-changing plays. Yeah, Ryan Williams is the best wide receiver on this Alabama roster, but I do not think that it's too one-dimensional in terms of just going to Ryan Williams. You look at a team like Ole Miss, I think you could very well make that argument, right? Che Harris had 16 targets in that football game. The next pass catcher only had 5. You can make that argument for Ole Miss. I don't think you can make that argument for Alabama. It was a Ryan Williams game for Alabama, but I don't think this Alabama passing attack is too reliant on someone like Ryan Williams. Second thing I want to say, Jalen Milroe is night and day better working all portions of the football field. You go back to 2023, it was, hey, we're just going to throw 20 plus yards down the field because that's where Jalen Milroe excels the most. And we don't really have a short intermediate passing attack. You saw that short intermediate passing attack come to life against Georgia. And I thought you saw Jaylen Milroe be very comfortable making those throws really all over the football field. You look at where Jaylen Milroe struggled last year, throwing to the boundary, throwing to the flat, missing throws that he clearly should be making in 2023. I think Jaylen Milroe looks unquestionably more confident in the short intermediate passing attack than he did in 2023. That's massive because you could argue last year that Alabama was too one-dimensional in terms of pushing the football down the field. Not having that short intermediate passing attack certainly hurt Alabama in football games in 2023. I think Jalen Milroe has taken massive strides in that short intermediate passing attack, and you have guys that can operate after the catch. I mean, Alabama had over 150 yards after the catch in this football game. This is a hard defense to manufacture yards after the catch. Alabama was able to do that. I think lastly, this rushing attack, obviously centered around Jalen Milroe, it's elite. You go back to Alabama, like they still want to run the football. They didn't run the football as much in this game as we're used to seeing because it kind of got into a little bit of a shootout. Jalen Milroe is obviously hot throwing the football. This is a rushing attack that is very difficult to stop. You saw Kirby Smart get up in the post-game press conference and say, it's really hard to deal with this Alabama offense when you have a wide receiver like Ryan Williams on the outside, but someone like Jalen Milroe at the quarterback position that can hurt you with his legs. Obviously, Jalen Milroe had a phenomenal game with his legs, not so much centered on the running backs in this football game. But I think we all know Alabama's got two really talented running backs in Jam Miller and Justice Haynes. My biggest takeaway here was this Georgia defense is so hard to get to the perimeter to in the run game because of how athletic these linebackers are. Alabama was able to. And Alabama was able to for two different reasons. One, the wide receivers and tight ends block their tails off on the perimeter. That's something that nobody talks about because you don't really talk about that when you're talking wide receivers and tight ends, what they do in the run blocking department. I mean, these wide receivers are ferocious run blockers, and they were manhandling what Georgia had on the perimeter. That's a massive storyline for Alabama. I think, secondly, because you have a quarterback like Jalen Milroe, linebackers, they're just a step late. Like, you have to respect what Jalen Milroe can do keeping the football. So when you're trying to diagnose and fit up runs, you're a step late because you know Jalen Milroe can keep the football and be extremely dangerous. And so Alabama had a very, very good time getting to the perimeter on a Georgia defense that there is not many teams in the country that can get to the perimeter run game against Georgia with how athletic those linebackers were. Last storyline on offense, I thought the pass protection was elite. That was my biggest question mark coming into this football game was, look, Georgia can get after you in the pass rush. We all know that. The tackle play for Alabama, especially when Caden Proctor was banged up, was not very good. I think we were all a little bit concerned. I think Alabama fans were certainly concerned in terms of how the pass protection, specifically at the offensive tackle spot, would hold up. I thought it was very, very good. In fact, I thought if there were question marks on the offensive line of pass protection, it probably came on the interior. And look, I haven't got no question marks about Jaden Roberts and T. Book on the inside. And so Alabama checked a lot of boxes that we wanted to see. Were they going to be able to run the football in Georgia? Yes, they could. Were they going to be able to separate down the field against a Georgia secondary that I think is very good? Yeah, they could. And were they going to be able to hold up in pass protection? They did. So Alabama checked a lot of those question marks that we had coming into this football game. Now you go to the defensive side of the football. This was an exceptional first half for Alabama. Carson Beck is a very hard quarterback to make confused and to make him look rattled. Carson Beck was rattled the whole first half. Now, did Carson Beck get a little hot in the second half? Yeah, absolutely. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I think the defensive backs played quite well. Damani Jackson, I thought, had a really good game. Xavier Brown obviously came up with a massive play in the end zone. Dude, the safety, someone like Keon Sabb need to play better. Yes, absolutely. That is still maybe a question mark that we have. But you look at the front seven and say, if you were to ask me what team has the better linebackers heading into this football game, I would answer Georgia. You ask me what linebackers played better in this football game on Saturday night, I would have said Alabama. I think people forget Alabama with Jahad Campbell and Deontay Lawson. Like, those are two NFL linebackers. They played like that on Saturday night. You look at Georgia. I mean, they were 5 of 5 on fourth downs. Alabama had 10 penalties for 90 yards. There are things that Alabama can clean up, specifically on fourth downs, eliminating some of those penalties. But on aggregate, like Alabama's defense, I thought played a very, very good first half. Got away from them a little in the second half, but again, you saw the peak of what Alabama's defense can be. This is still a very good defense that's only allowing 15 points per game. That's top 20 in the country. If you get that kind of Alabama defense with that kind of Alabama offense, I think it makes it the best team in the country. I, I have a feeling we're going to see this football game again. I think as a pure college football fan, I want to see this football game again because it's two of the best teams in the country. You look at the landscape of the SEC: Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas. Those are some of the best teams in the country. I mean, the SEC at the top end is as good as it gets nationally. We're going to see a lot of good football games, but I think Saturday night, Alabama kind of showed that they're the team to beat heading to the rest of 2024. We'll close it out there. Wanted to hop on, just give some of my takes on what I saw in this football game. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.